Okay, so now on to today's topic. So today's webinar is co-hosted by Perfecto, a Perforce company, and Curiosity Software Island. Our topic is achieving in sprint regression, convert continuous feedback into rigorous automated testing. So I'm extremely excited to introduce two brilliant, knowledgeable and experienced speakers. So we've got Julius Mong, who's a senior solutions engineer at Perfecto. Julian's a person to go to for all things test execution, labs and environment configuration, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say on in sprint regression. And secondly then, we have my colleague at Curiosity, James Walker. James is Director of Technology. He's got wide reach and expertise in model-based testing, as well as test automation and test data automation. So just briefly then, today, what we're going to be talking about. So Julius and James are going to kick us off with a fireside chat. They're going to be drawing on their experience to consider why in sprint regression is not widespread. What are the common barriers we face to in sprint regression, and why is this such a problem? They'll then be going on to talk about why and how model-based testing can help, before going on to a demo to show this approach in practice. And for that demo, they'll be using Curiosity's test modeler as well as the Perfecto platform. As I said, we'll then be ending with a live Q&A and discussion, so please do send all your questions through and let's make this as interactive as possible. But with no further ado, I'd like now to hand over to you, Julius, to carry on with the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. I'm very excited to be sharing some insights, or well, I wouldn't say insights, but sharing some thoughts about what we've learned from being of Perfecto, or part of Perforce organization, and also in offering automation as Perfecto to various industries. So maybe if I just start sharing my screen just to make sure we can carry on from there. So are you able to see that?
Perfect.
Yeah,
yep.
That's perfect.
Okay, great. So let's move those two windows out of the place. Great. So who is Perfecto? So we are a part of a Perforce, the Perforce organization. So Perforce as a whole it operates in over 80 countries, and the company offers solutions that covers the entire, well, I wouldn't say entire, but very wide portion of an aspect of a software development lifecycle. And the products that operate, or the brands that operate under Perforce, include things like agile management, test case management, code versioning, and so on. Think GitLab, and but for enterprise use and so on. We have different products that cover different aspects: API management and source code management, and so on and so forth. So for this, for the context of this webinar, obviously we come from the Perfecto angle, and which is the focus on the automation of testing, and this would be web and mobile testing. Think of it as a test lab on the cloud, where you can access Windows and Mac machines and mobile devices, and real mobile devices, emulators and simulators, easily from one interface. And it enables you to test at scale as well. So you can scale and spin things up very easily, very quickly, and you can scale your testing with minimum cost. And the benefits of that obviously would be to help you speed things up, speed up the process of finding bugs, finding them early, fixing them early. And also, one key aspect of that is, if you can fix things much earlier within sprint, that means you're saving a lot of costs, because for as a general guideline, we gain from industry knowledge from all different kinds of banking industries, manufacturing industry, automotive, and so on. We know that as a general rule, any defect that makes into production, or that gets made into production, costs roughly £500 to £600 to fix. And if you're looking at a couple of 30, 40, or even hundreds of bugs or defects making into production every regular period of time, then that cost very quickly adds up to it. So Perfecto, really, what we want to do is to enable our customers and partners to be able to do in-sprint testing, and that is all we care about, and to make testing of value rather than a liability.
Fabulous. Thank you, Julius. Thanks, Tom. So my name's James Walker, and I'm from a company called Curiosity Software Ireland. This is probably, I would say, maybe our third or fourth testing company that we've had going on over the past 30 to 35 years collectively. So Curiosity Software is kind of the latest addition. We started in 2017, so we're still quite a new company, but we've got quite a large global presence now across the US, the UK, India, Australia, and also Ireland as well, which is where we're headquartered. But basically, we're kind of specialist in two core areas. The first one is through test data. So we have a product offering called Test Data Automation. And really, that's all about how can you automate your test data? How can you provision it into your test environments so that it's compliant and readily available for your test automation? Okay, so big topic. The second area, which is what we're going to be focusing on mostly today, along with Perfecto, is called Test Modeler. And that is basically a tool for model-based testing, which is, I would say, quite a hot topic at the moment. And what we're doing is we're helping a lot of companies to also move into in Sprint test automation, remove the barriers to automation, as in helping people automate more, automate faster, and just not having to have, a highly specialized team of automation engineers in the mix. I think, what you're going to see throughout this webinar today is really, how the combination of tools is very powerful. Test Modeler is a great tool for helping you create automation. And I think what you're going to see is Perfecto has amazing capabilities in there for running tests in parallel across, many environments, and also fantastic reporting capabilities. So I think, that's the combination, which is what we're really going to show today. But as Julius quite rightly mentioned there, we do together a lot of other pieces as well. So thanks for that.
Yeah, indeed. So what we would like to do is maybe I can just sort of set the scene a little. I know before the webinar, we sent out some questions, almost like a poll. And then what we like to do here as well is we also want to bring up some questions or some points for considerations. And then we have a little poll as well during the webinar, and and then we start to go through some of these, points that the audience have shown interest in exploring further, or they've seen they regard as the challenges, the key challenges that they have to face when trying to put continuous testing in place, and so on. So what continuous testing looks like in an ideal world would be something like this, right? So you have your, pretty much everything, every aspect of your software development lifecycle. You have mobile application or web applications you want to deploy, you want to, roll out to the market. And most often, in an ideal scenario, many organizations would like to have testing in sprints and be able to have it smooth, flowing smoothly. But what tends to happen in real life is a lot of the time tests are failing, and there are some challenges where, first of all, moving from local hardware-based testing, when I say local hardware, meaning for example mobile devices, a lot of companies nowadays are still, they're doing automation, they're able to do that with various different tools, open source or whatnot, but with devices that are actually on their desks or in a rack somewhere that they have to manage. And that can be a bit of a problem, especially given the strange times we live in now. And so what then they find is a lot of times, and then, adding on top of that, the problem with having to, having difficulty in writing tests or maintaining stable tests or robust coding, practices and so on, testing becomes a huge liability, and it often breaks. And it slows things down, and it makes it impossible to roll out things very quickly and seamlessly. So that brings to our mini poll, and that is where we've gathered a number of sort of most common challenges that many of our customers have seen or are seeing over the years, and we would like to explore further into some of these, and then also we would also love to hear some insights from James as well, sharing from his side of the software software development lifecycle, as well as me sharing some insights from what we've learned in the industries.
Brilliant, thank you, Julius. So yeah, you should all now be able to see the poll up on screen. So as Julius said, we'd like to make this as interactive as possible, get input from you all, as well as then from Julius and James. So we'll just have a minute or two to read through these questions and vote, and then we'll discuss some of the barriers to in-sprint regression testing that you and we find. Brilliant. Thank you to everybody who's voted so far. We'll just have another half a minute or so to give everybody time. Okay, so just a few more seconds. I can see some more votes still coming in. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for voting in that. So I'll now share the results. So Julius and James, you should be able to see the results on screen.
Yep, indeed.
Brilliant.
So that's certainly very interesting, and it resonates very well with what we've also learned from many of our customers before and after they, well, actually mostly before they put a cloud platform in place for testing, and also a platform like Test Modeler for the test creation and stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think a lot of this resonates with certainly most of the organizations we work with. I think if we're just looking at the results here, insufficient test coverage being one of the biggest ones, that certainly resonates with our experience. We used to spend a lot of time going into companies, almost doing a mini audit, to understand how well they're testing, what they're testing, and how effective, their test suites are. And, a lot of the time we would go in and we would, identify that actually most of the tests in the test suite were very happy path driven. They weren't thinking about, different combinations, but also, the actual coverage itself, looking at the requirements coverage, was somewhere in the range of 20 to 30%, which was obviously just so low. So I think, that being the top one really does not surprise me. And I would say that is an age-old problem. That's not something new. That's been around for quite some time, regardless of automated testing, right?
Yeah, indeed. So I guess we will sort of focus on maybe just discussing the test coverage. I think that's probably the topic that most people are interested in how to resolve that, or how to go at tackling this problem. And then obviously the other one would be test creation and difficulty in creating tests and so on. And then depending on time, we can also explore the other scenarios. So for test coverage, I think from Perfecto's angle, what we have seen is a lot of the time you have test, let's say regression pack built that covers a lot of time, in particular for web. People tend to test on Chrome, and then they just test on maybe the last 3 versions of Chrome, and covering some functionality of their applications, or maybe applications. These could include UI testing, end-to-end testing, and so on and so forth, headless, and so on. But then what they then find is when the tests are run on mobile platforms, for example, or even other platforms, I think lots of companies also see a challenge in testing on Macs as well. Then they start seeing, okay, so I've got coverage for one configuration or a few configuration. When I expand that testing, I'm starting to see many more layers that I need to cover, in addition to being, adding platforms to the test suite, to provide the test coverage, as well as when I'm looking at mobile devices, there's other aspects like orientation, there's different screen resolutions. If the tests are, if I'm a bank or if I'm a retail store, I need to do some location, store finders, or, nearest ATM location and stuff like that. Then I need to add that layer for location, and then some other, environment aspects. Let's say someone is using, browsing the website, and they're trying to, look at transactions, and they walk into a coffee shop and they lose signal, or the signal changes from cellular to Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi to cellular, and so on. These kind of sort of, we call them environmental, aspects of testing. Then they see challenges, and first of all, they don't have the ability to test those things because they don't have the ability to reproduce these environments. And then secondly, they don't have a robust way to scale this. I can buy some phones and I can buy some, tablets and so on. But there's only a certain number of devices you can manage without going insane in-house. And especially with COVID times, it has become a lot more challenging to ask people to touch devices that don't belong to them. So, James, what do you also see like sort of similar scenarios like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's quite interesting here is I think coverage has different meanings to everyone. I think, from your perspective, what we're talking about coverage here is, as you've rightly said, on the configuration level, right? I mean, I was just reading a blog just before this webinar on testing foldable smartphones, right? Who's tested that combination? How do you know how your app's going to react? You just really don't. Our whole angle with Test Modeler on coverage is more thinking about it from more the requirement perspective. So how much of our, requirements are being covered by our test cases? And I think, coming back to what we were talking about earlier, what we often find is most people just focus on the happy paths, the happy routes for a system, right? So, but really, it's thinking about the negative combinations. What happens if I try and transfer some money, but I'm already, I've already maxed out my overdraft? How should that, what should the response be? Obviously, my transaction should be invalid, right? So I think, there's many, many different perspectives to coverage. But I think, as an organization, you need to be thinking about all of these. And I think a lot of the time it's going to come down to, what are my users using? What environments are they using? Let's pick off the top 10, 20%, and what user scenarios really matter to me. And then I'm going to really focus on them, I suppose. But I think it's a very interesting area. And I really like the angle of thinking about these different environments as well.
Yeah, indeed. And that's certainly, I mean, one point that you raised that is we see a lot as well is the fact that customers are testing applications in configurations that you've never foreseen and you've never anticipated. And we've certainly seen a scenario where, well, actually a recent example that a bank, I wouldn't pinpoint to a different particular country, but in Europe they released. They actually have the application available on the App Store, but then iOS 14 beta came along and people were installing that, and then suddenly the app was reporting that the devices are jailbroken, which is not the case, and a lot of customers were not happy, and that's kind of also highlights the point of being able to test before your users do, before your users test your applications for you, could mean a lot. You only really take a handful of very, very poor reviews to really ruin the rating on the App Store. So we've certainly seen that example where it was not very pleasant. So and then there's also the other aspect of as James, you mentioned, how the application should handle things, or in other words, should fail gracefully when things don't work, or when you expect it to not work, going in the middle of a transaction and then completely losing signal, and then the transaction should fail. But how should the application handle it in a graceful way? I think that these are the things that would definitely be important to explore as well in providing test coverage.
I think so. I mean, if you look at, I think test coverage is probably more important now than ever before, especially when you're thinking about these user journeys, right? The role of testing has just changed so dramatically. Whereas before, I think, it used to be more of a compliance function, let's tick some boxes, let's make sure everything's kind of working as we expect, and, whatever we'll just release if it, reaches all of these, points that we wanted to, right? Whereas now, I think testing has become very much, user-centric. It's all about, does an app perform how it should? Is the user experience, as we expect it to be on all these different devices, et cetera, et cetera. It's so easy for a customer now to say, we've had a bad experience with this piece of software or with this app, and just change providers, right? If I'm a bank or I'm insurance, or even from an airline perspective, or just anything really, I can literally just go on, change provider, and go and sign up to another service. So I think testing is more important now than ever before. So I think this is very, very valuable and very important.
Yeah, indeed, and that brings to my next point is the environments, the lab that the customers choose, or customers of Perfecto, organizations choose as their provider. So you mentioned that customers, like end users of applications, they can just switch their services overnight, and it's pretty simple. But it's not the case for organizations, especially as you mentioned, banks and so on, as we all aware. When they choose to go with one provider, it's immensely difficult to switch to another. Although they use similar technologies, maybe, on paper, they might have similar features and stuff like that, but it is not an easy job to do. And it means downtime. It means, not being able to test during that downtime, and you're taking an entirely risk-based approach. And so it's also important, and we've been told a lot by industry leaders from various parts of the world, is that it is often, at first they probably look at the solution. They want to get a solution in place. They want to put a lab in place. And they obviously, after getting, let's say, test modeler to work with a lab, they just look at the features. And then in the end, they find that it is not the feature, it is not the platform that they're getting. It is important, but it is the people. It is the expertise within the organization that they can draw experience from. And I think that's probably one of the key parts of, or one of the key considerations in choosing a provider for that lab. And then, of course, when there are also other aspects like security and all the rest that will, especially in most organizations, but especially in financial services or any industry that handles vast amounts of sensitive data, security is also of paramount. So, I mean, James, do you have any customers that you see have come into some similar problems in identifying a cloud provider?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of changed a bit now. I think maybe 6 to 9 months ago, when we were doing installations and, working on implementations, everyone was, choosing to take everything on premise, right? And that was just kind of the way it was. Everyone wanted everything within their environment. They wanted it, secured, on premise, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas now, I think what we're seeing is almost every customer we work with is talking about the cloud. I think they've kind of realized that, most people are not working from the office now. They're actually really struggling to actually provide that infrastructure themselves. Whereas, now it's very much, just put it on AWS, put it on Google Cloud, you've got world-based experts who have secured those systems for you already. And you've basically got the best of breed of everything, just take and pick what you need. So we're definitely seeing a lot of cloud-based activity at the moment, a lot more than I ever envisioned. But I do think that is just because of the nature of how we're working, where we're working, and everything associated is just changing so rapidly beyond us at the moment.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that's also brings up a really good point as well. It's because I guess, you know, what happened with the virus situation, that certainly sort of made a lot of people realize that the importance of you know, or the downside of having to run an in-house lab. And I mean, previously, we've also seen a lot of organizations previously opting to or sticking to the concept of having things on-prem because they feel this is more secure and stuff. But obviously, you know, now they're beginning to see the pain and the challenge of being having to manage such a or access, you know, when they're all working remotely. And I think one indication is, you know, when selecting or looking for a solution is how many banks or, you know, financial or you know, as any other solution that you would look for as well, is how many of the you know, how many other customers they have that are of the industry that you're interested in, or you are in, you know, you're yourself in, of course. And that would be a clear indication of how secure their platform is and how much emphasis they put on the security side. So we don't have a slide on the test creation aspect, but you know, James, maybe you can share with us some insights as to.
Yeah, I think we'll cover this a lot in the demo, to be honest. But I think, you know, the core kind of piece here in terms of test creation is, you know, it's very unsystematic. You know, if you look at the way a lot of people create their tests, is just kind of pie in the sky. You know, let's go out and let's just pick some tests and let's add them to our test case management tool.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the reality is, you know, if you look at every other industry, there's a lot of science behind what we do. And really it's adding structure and methodology behind testing. You know, how can we create a good set of test cases, which basically achieve everything we've just spoken before, right? Have a high level of coverage, think about our different environments, think about our, you know, different, where we're executing the tests, et cetera, as well, right? So what we're going to go through in the demo a bit later on is very much how can we create a highly, you know, a good set of coverage test cases automatically using an approach called model-based testing. But very much, I think if you look at the industry today, everyone's creating their tests manually. It's very unsystematic and it's very ad hoc. You know, it's very rare that you find individuals who are thinking about, you know, the different user journeys, the different coverage levels they want to achieve from a test suite. You know, there are good people out there who exist who do that, but it is very rare that you find that, I think.
Yeah, and also some challenges we see in test creation is being able to create real user journeys. You know, things like we're seeing a lot more of these examples on the mobile platform nowadays, especially in the banking industry and retail, is that the ability, well, the requirement to automate the action of capturing images, and these could be, you know, checks or image of a card for validation, ID cards or QR codes or barcodes and stuff. And these are things that are, you know, previously were not easily doable, both you know, in automation, they would have to be done manually, but in terms of test creation, even with automation, is not always easy to do with, for example, open source, you know, technology. So you know, that's also definitely a challenge as well in being able to find a solution to provide that coverage and enable that test case or test creation capability. So James, I think you know, you probably have some more insights in, you know, how what your customers have sort of look at, you know, managing change and
yeah. So I think, you know, almost every company now is moving into, you know, agile methodologies. And I think if you look at what that change has introduced, there's an awful lot of, you know, well, that's it. There's an awful lot of change behind the change. You know, user stories are changing all the time. New requirements are coming in. And, you know, developers are able to pick this up very quickly, and they were able to react to that change and develop systems and develop new functionality really rapidly, right? If you look out there in the industry, you know, it's very easy to develop software. It's most of the time it's just pulling in new libraries from Git and assembling them together to create a solution, right? And if you look at a lot of programming languages out there, they're very abstract now. You know, they're building on layers upon layers on layers of, you know, different objects and different methodologies to make programming very easy, right? Whereas if you look at the testing domain, it's really not caught up, and it's really not gone at the same speed. You know, to create a good set, to create test cases, you virtually have to start from scratch every time. It's very textual based, it's very slow. You know, there's no real science behind it. And it's really, you know, every time we get a new requirement, we have to go off and we have to start from scratch all over again. And that's really, you know, not right, I would say. So what we have done is we have moved into the world of model-based testing. And we've been working with numerous companies on helping them transition into, I don't want to say model-driven, you know, development practices, but very much kind of model-centric, you know, development. And basically what we have to that extent is a tool called Test Modeler. Now, I would say model-based testing is a bit of a horrible term. It seems to have quite a lot of negative annotations, and it sounds quite sciencey. Really, it's just all about drawing diagrams. You know, anyone can come in and draw flowcharts. I think, you know, at primary school or kindergarten, most children are there drawing diagrams of flowcharts, etc., etc. Okay, so simply you create a model of how the application should work or what the requirement is that we want to be built. Okay, now what we have got is a whole world of accelerators to get started with modeling. So if you look at most companies out there, they will have some kind of existing asset that exists, you know, that either they've spent a lot of time creating, like a test asset, or they've got assets like a system that's already been developed or some kind of manual test cases or something. So what we have are accelerators that can help companies take what they have already and move into the world of model-based testing. Okay. If you just go forward a few bits, Julius. So once you have a model, what you can do is you can use that model to auto-generate the perfect set of test cases. Okay, so once we've got that model, we can push out those tests into Jira, Azure DevOps, Micro Focus ALM, Micro Focus Octane, etc., etc. Okay, so earlier on when we were talking about test creation still being an issue, we will auto-create the test cases for you from that diagram that you create. Okay, another problem that we see quite a lot in the industry is test data. Okay, you know, if you look at a lot of automation, it actually becomes very brittle, especially over time. And one of the reasons for that is not having the right test data to support test cases as they're being run. Okay, so from the modeler, you can come out and you can say, go and find me a particular type of data or a particular type of account from SAP, Oracle, SQL Server, or some kind of containerized database. If you cannot find data, go and make it. Okay. Now, the final piece here is test automation, which is massive. And I'm sure Julius will agree on that. There's just so many different automation execution engines out there, like Selenium, Appium, Cypress, etc., etc. I think people now are really taking a standpoint of, you know, take a look, what kind of application am I testing, and work backwards. What is the best automation execution engine for me to automate that type of application? Okay, now from the model, what you can do is you can come in, you can start overlaying different actions, open this app, click on this button, enter text here, assert this error message. And really what we're doing is we're automating the automation. From the model, we will automatically create automation scripts or automated tests and publish them into whatever tool you're using. Okay, now the nice bit here, the combination of the two tools from Test Modeler, we are creating an awful lot of automation scripts. And what you can do is you can publish those tests and you can run them inside Perfecto. And what that allows you to do is run as many tests as you want in parallel, but also it allows you to run them on whatever platform, whatever environment, or whatever screen resolution, etc., you desire. So the combination is actually very, very powerful. And I think in tandem, if you're thinking about test coverage, you can really complete you know, that cube that Julius showed you at the beginning. Okay, so I think that probably covers that slide. Okay, do you want to pick this one up, Julius?
Yes. So well, I'm cautious of time, so maybe we just jump right into the demo.
Yeah, I think so. I think let's go for it. Okay. All right. Great. So let me take the screen, and hopefully this will work. Okay. So this will take over. Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay. Is that coming through?
Yep.
All right. Perfect. So what we're going to do here. This is Test Modeler, by the way. It's an entirely web-based platform. As I mentioned earlier, we have users using this in the cloud, but they can also install it on premise. Okay. Now, one of our core pillars here is around collaboration. So we have logged into a workspace, and this is basically a shared resource where people can work together to create models, create automation, and really, design different models of how their tests should work. Okay. Now, what we're going to do in this demo is we are going to test some of the Perfecto website. Okay, so within here, we have the capability to come in and sign up for a free trial. Okay, so if you're interested, you can just go to this URL and sign up for your own free trial if you like. But what we're going to use is one of our accelerators, which is this one here. And what this allows us to do is to take an existing web page and start to scan it, picking out different areas of the screen that I want to use in my automation. Okay, so here we've scanned a few input boxes, a few drop downs, and a button here. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to come away and we're actually going to upload this into Test Modeler. Okay, so we'll call this our sign up page, and we'll upload this, and we'll see this has been uploaded successfully. Now, if we come into our a Test Modeler here, and we take a look, what you'll see here are all of the objects that we just scanned. Okay, now for this web UI, what we have done is we have picked out many different identifiers for picking out each of these objects. So you'll see for the first name, all the different IDs and different identifiers, same for last name, company, phone numbers, etc., etc. What we've also done here is we have built out an implementation layer. Now, as we mentioned at the beginning, Test Modeler integrates with many, many different automation tools. And what we have basically selected to do here is to come in and publish test cases into a Java Selenium framework. So if we look here, we had a new commit that was just made 39 seconds ago. And what we have basically done here is created an automation page object for our sign-up page. So here we've got things like go to URL, enter first name, enter last name, the various selects. And then at the bottom here, we've got click start free trial. Okay, so we've created a page object for us to interact with this page. And as I say, that could be in any technology, really. It could be C#, Python, Robot, UFT, LeanFT, etc., etc. Now, once we have some objects, what we can do is we can come in and we can enter the world of modeling. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new model, and we'll see that this opens up. And if you're familiar with, Visio, etc., etc., it's very similar. You can come in, start dragging blocks, and you can connect them together. But what we're going to use is one of our accelerators here. And what that allows us to do is to come in and take a screen that we have scanned, and we can come in and we can start to build a model from it. So what do we want to do? How do we want to connect these blocks together? Well, the first thing we want to do is go to the URL. We are then going to enter a first name. We're then going to enter a last name. We're then going to enter a phone number. We'll then enter a company. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go through our various drop downs. Okay, so we need to select a job function in here. Okay, and we then need to select the trial interest. Okay, now at the end, what we're going to do is we're going to click the start free trial button. Okay, now what this has done, if we just take a couple of minutes to think here, as I have brought in these objects, it has split it for me into different types of test cases. Okay, now if you remember at the beginning, I said a lot of the tests we see in the industry are very much happy path driven. But what we have done here is we have auto detected what some of these objects are, like the last name, And we have provided some negative test cases and some negative data here to give us what should happen if we enter bad data in this field. Now, sat behind these objects, we have the concept of test data. So for an invalid last name, we've got some bad data. Empty is obviously empty. Valid last name, things get a little bit more interesting. And here we've got a data generation function to go off and randomly generate data. And in actual fact, in Test Modeler, we've got about 500 different functions for generating all sorts of different data in here for lots of different data characteristics you may want to have. But if we think about the model here, if we go through the topmost route, everything we enter is positive, and we click Start Free Trial, we should go through here and we should end up with a new trial associated. Okay. If we come back out here and we drop off at one of our bad points where we enter some kind of negative data, that is where we may end up in some kind of error scenario. Okay. And what I could do here is I could start overlaying different assertions for different error messages. Or if I'm testing an API, I could assert different response codes or different payloads coming back. But what you should end up with is a model which represents how, in this case, we end up signed up successfully for a new trial, or how we end up in some kind of error scenario. Okay, and this is really what modeling is all about. Create a model which covers all the different ways I can use this particular process or this particular type of the application. And the nice thing here is that anyone can come in and they can visually take a look at this model and immediately understand how we're testing it, how it works. So it's almost a piece of living documentation. Now, once you've got that model, what you could do is you can come in and you can generate test cases. So we're going to come in here and basically we've hit the generate button and that has generated 17 paths here. Each of these is a test case. It's a different scenario or a different route for our model. And what you'll see as I'm clicking through here are the different routes that is taken through my model for each of these paths. Okay. Now, what I could then do is I could take this model and I could go and publish it to some kind of test case management tool. Or in this case, what we are actually going to do is go off and generate some automation. Okay. And what this will do is it will auto generate all of the automation scripts for these 17 paths. Okay. It will resolve any test data. It will push it back into my open source framework that we have. And then what it is going to do is it's going to start running these tests within the Perfecto environment. So what we're going to do now is we're going to switch over to Julius, who's going to show us some of these tests as they're running in real time right now. Is that okay, Julius?
Yep. So, so let me just start sharing my screen. Okay, so what we're looking at now is the test starting to run. I mean, obviously, there's a bunch of tests that's been fired up, and as you can see, there are, tests that are constantly being added to the live test being run. So this is the live stream where you can see tests that are being run, and you can set up, different users to have different visibility of the tests being run on various devices. And the value of this is, once you're able to fire up these tests on a cloud platform, again, you can specify different combination, and this could be, Windows, Mac, and different browser versions, and it also works for mobile applications as well. So for web, you can obviously run on mobile, on web, environments. Browsers on Windows and Mac, but you can also run web tests on mobile devices and compare them side by side. So, let's say you run this on a range of devices and you can quickly compare the results. And some might have failed, and then you can go into, the actual test and see exactly why it failed. And it could be scripting issues. It could be, in the case of applications, it could be that the application doesn't support certain things, or the application is failing because of the flow that was generated by Test Modeler, and you probably never thought of, customer would be able to get to that stage and to break the application in such, scenarios. So what you can also then do is to define, we have machine learning capabilities built in to identify the most popular or the most common test failure reasons that will, the platform will automatically tag tests that we have identified by machine learning that fall into those common failure reasons. But you also have the ability to define your own failure reasons, because there might be failure reasons that are specific to your applications, and it's going to fail under such circumstances. Then you can define those as custom and quickly filter or sort your data or sort your test results by these keywords and tags and so on. What you can also do is, once you generated these test journeys, you can put them into your CI pipeline so that you have them running every night, if not every couple of hours. And then just go to the CI dashboard to look at individual columns. So each column represents an iteration. Basically, the more green, the better. If there are any other colors, that means something has failed, and you can go into and see more details as to what test might have failed on what device and so on. And you can also view test results in the form of a heat map, where it gives you an instant view of what devices are failing most, and it could be also resolutions and so on and so forth. So there are various ways that to help you speed up the process of getting feedback, so to help you make instant decisions without having to spend hours in crunching through different test results and test reports and so on. So the idea is to be able to give you a platform that you can, number one, run a number of tests on a range of platforms of your choice, and number two, being able to get feedback very, very quickly, and as well as having environments where it allows you to create more sophisticated test scenarios, including environmental parameters, Wi-Fi connection, or bandwidth in and out of the network condition that you're running your test in, biometrics, being able to inject images and so on and so forth, and basically to allow you to test like your users, as well as automate those journeys that Test Modeler will generate. So coming back to the points we wanted to raise during this webinar is, there are key challenges, obviously, as agreed and also as shown in the poll, that many of you are facing day in and day out, and trying to tackle or finding a way to make it less of a problem, less of a pain. And certainly, there are solutions out there, Test Modeler, Perfecto, amongst other tooling that are out there that would be able to, help you solve many, if not all, of these problems. And I think that brings nicely to our Q&A session. I think a lot of our participants have asked a lot of questions that are very relevant questions, and it would be really nice to also get insight from James, and I'll be happy to share any comments from my experience as well.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Julius. Thank you, James. So if you do have any questions, please do write them either in the chat box or the Q&A box. If you wanted to ask your question live, please click raise hand, and then I will be able to unmute you and let you talk. So if we kick off with some questions which came in during the session. So one question that came through was regarding Test Modeler, and it asked, is the model just a prototype? So is the model a prototype in this approach?
Yeah, good question. So is the model a prototype? So, I mean, the way we often think about this is the model kind of becomes your central source of truth. If you think about, the way we develop software, there's just so many dependent assets. Someone may start with some requirements in Jira in a user story. They may then transition to some source code, which ends up in Git. It then transitions to some kind of test case, which ends up in some kind of test case management tool, right? So, I mean, there's so many dependent assets and so many dependent pieces. Really what we're trying to do is move the model into something that's real, and it feeds all of these different touch points. So from that one model, you should be able to create your requirements and auto-populate them. You can, developers can pick it up and have a clear understanding of what they're building, and you can link the model to different source code if you want to. You could use the model to push out your test cases and push out your test automation as well. So I think in terms of it being a prototype, you could use it that way, and you could have it that you create the model as your initial requirement, as the prototype for the system, but very much it should be that model will progress forward as your software is being developed, and it's going through the different stages of the software development lifecycle, And at the end, that should reflect, the model should reflect what has been built and what the real world system is. So you could take it all the way from the prototype stages to, in development, to in test, to released, and then it will become almost a living piece of documentation for what that part of the application does. Hopefully that answers the question.
Brilliant, great stuff. So we've had an interesting question just come through, which is asking, how about native mobile apps? Is it possible to generate tests for such applications?
Yeah, from Test Modeler 100%. You can use techniques like Appium, which is a very popular open source testing tool for automating mobile apps. So you can generate Appium code and push them out. And then Julius, obviously you can run Appium inside Perfecto as well, right?
Yeah, correct. So, Perfecto basically supports any open source framework, as well as providing a framework that our customers can use easily. And amongst other commercially available tools as well, of course, Test Modeler and so on. So, and in addition to native apps, hybrid apps are also supported. So what you've seen then, our example was to run a Selenium test. In this scenario, there's no limitation as to running Appium tests or any other mobile application tests, including hybrid apps on Perfecto.
Brilliant, thank you. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and we've had plenty of questions come through. So this is another good one, which asks, how about visual testing? And the example given is UI and UX rendering.
Is that a question to me?
To you both. So yeah, how about visual testing? And I suspect this might be referring to visual assertions in testing.
Yeah, so it depends the definition of visual testing, how deep or how advanced you need it. So Perfecto provides the ability to visually identify things, or text or images and so on, being displayed on the screen. So for both web and mobiles, you can do visual analysis in that sense. I want to find this image. I want to make sure the logo is there. I want to click this button that says this certain, click me. So you can certainly do those things, and also just simply a simple case of finding things and do comparison, as I showed earlier, up to 32 at a time in parallel, to see how, visually things differ on different resolutions, different platforms, different, mobile devices and so on, or a mix of all of those. And you also have the ability to integrate with other more advanced stuff, advanced platforms that specialize in visual analysis and visual testing.
Yeah, I mean, we're from a test modeler perspective, we're exactly the same. We usually leverage third-party tools for these kind of pieces. So obviously you could natively do that inside Perfecto, which is great. But also we have integrations with other vendors out there like Apply Tools. There's some other ones out there which do similar operations as well. But certainly that is something that we have full integration with. Yeah,
and same goes for Perfecto. Apply Tools and Perfecto work very closely together. And I see also some other question about API testing, and that's nothing stopping you from doing those as well. So think of Perfecto as an easy way to access a wide range of platforms, both web and mobile virtual devices, and you can do those things.
Yeah, I would say for API testing from a modeling perspective, you can really model anything. There's no kind of limitations. If you're thinking about testing, different layers of your application stack, they're just different types of models. I think here what we've done in this demo is we've focused very exclusively on user interface testing, right? Which is, a model that ends up being enter text here, click on this button, et cetera, et cetera. It's quite visual. If you're thinking about testing an API, you're really modeling, the different messages that you're going to hit an endpoint with. Okay, so you may be modeling different payloads with different data characteristics, and they may be going through all sorts of different logic sat behind one endpoint in your API. Okay, you could also model data transformation. So if you're thinking about ETL and ETL testing, you would model the data journeys. These are the touch points my data is going through. These are the different transformations that are taking effect. And, the model then reflects what the data should look like at the end of that transformation. So there are many different types of models, and they can be applied across the whole stack, you know, within your kind of project and environment.
Brilliant, thanks for that. So we've got just 2 minutes now, so maybe if we do one more question. So this one, I think is aimed at you, James. So you mentioned right at the beginning doing test case audits to measure coverage. The question is, did you perform testing assurance as a part of this process? So for instance, do you look at things like the test approach and its suitability and traceability?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, a lot of the time it was very much just looking at what's there. You know, in terms of, you know, the approach for generating tests, et cetera, I would say, you know, almost every company that we worked with in the past, I think things have moved along a little bit now, but it was very much unsystematic. You know, you know, there would be a test plan, but in terms of the science behind, you know, where that test plan came from and the actual test cases that came from it, it was just kind of picked out and said, you know, this is what we're testing and this is what we're going for. Whereas, you know, now I think, you know, techniques like model-based testing are becoming more prevalent. And I think a lot more companies now are starting to think about, or, you know, they're starting to have the mindset of, hey, we should be thinking about how we're generating our tests. What are we focusing on? How are we going to generate them? And it's very much thinking about risk as well. Okay, so let's test the most risky parts of our system more extensively, and that will make up our test suite. So yeah, I think, you know, when we were doing this a couple of years ago, it was very, you know, it wasn't that advanced, but now I think we're seeing a lot of companies move the needle in this area.
Brilliant, thank you, James. So we're now at the end of our time. So we've had a lot of great questions through, and I'll gather those up and send them through to the speakers afterwards. In terms of next steps, of course, please do get in touch if you have any further questions. You know, we'll send out both Julius and James's email address for you to get in touch. There's going to be a post-webinar survey. Fill that out if you want to hear from us. Please also visit testmodeler.io for a free trial. We also have a free tutorial for using Test Modeler with Perfecto. So expect to get the slides and the recording, as well as contact details for Julius and James. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. The last thing to say then is a huge thank you to everyone for attending, and a huge thank you to Julius and James for presenting.
Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to end the session now. So thank you very much.